Great. Today we're going to talk about backing up your genealogy data, and these are the points that we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about how safe is your genealogy data, why you would want to back up your data, how to make a data backup plan. I think that's sort of what you've talked about or alluded to. That's what we're talking overall is you've got to have a plan. I've often thought of, Geoff, the song 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. I should rewrite it to say 50 Ways to Back Up Your Data.
I like that.
And yeah, what is it? You got to have a plan, Stan. And so identifying data for backup. This is probably one of the more difficult things that we're going to deal with today. The basics, and also data hides in the strangest places. What else? Backup types. There are different types of backups, believe it or not. How to identify a method that works for you, and this is very important. You should not embrace a backup method that is going to be a challenge and that does not work for you. So we're going to help you identify a method that works for you. We're going to talk about the basic data backup methods. We're also going to talk about online data backup programs. And also free, freemium, or free. Which should you go with when you select some of these programs? Important, restoring data. What good is doing a data backup if you don't know how to restore your data, or you haven't tested your data that you've been backing up for weeks or for years? And then finally, we're going to close out with some data best practices. I want to point out, Geoff, to the listeners that the syllabus is going to be available with a copy of the CD recording backing up your genealogy data. And we've got 6 pages of very easy to understand text. There's a glossary of terminology. There's a set of links to all the websites that we're going to cover in this webinar. Great. So let's get started. How safe is your genealogy data? I want everyone to be honest with themselves right now. When was the last time you backed up your genealogy data? I know we just had a poll, and I believe we came in at 58%, said that they backed up a week ago or less, and I have to tell you, I'm very impressed with that. I really am. But that still means that there are 42% there that are not doing on a weekly basis, and if you're really doing a lot of research, you should be backing up at least once a week. Also ask yourself, if you didn't have your computer or your laptop right now, or even your mobile phone, what data would you lose? What if those things disappeared? Do you really know what data would disappear along with that? And finally, how long would it take you to reconstruct that data? I can speak from personal experience. I once lost my genealogy data file. I had not backed up on a regular schedule. I lost probably about 3 or 4 months worth of work. It was difficult to reconstruct. We all know if we're using online research, sometimes those web pages change or they go away. Also, where would you go to get the information? That's part of the challenge. If you haven't done source citations, you have a birth date and a death date, but where would you begin to go and look for that information once you do reconstruct it? All right, let's talk about the leading causes of data loss. This is two of our more interesting polls. And actually, poll number 3, where we asked human error actually comes in at 32%. I think most of our attendees said 41%. The number 1 is hardware or system malfunction. Much of what you went through, Geoff, in terms of overheating, fan problems, cooling issues, hard drive meltdown, system malfunction, basically Windows just decides to stop working, etc. Human error, 32%. When we say human error, I'm not talking about deleting a file accidentally. It's very easy sometimes to overwrite a file, very easy to knock a computer over, to drop something and damage the inside. So it's interesting to know that computer viruses and natural disasters really together only account for about 10% of data loss. So let's talk about how safe your genealogy data is. You really need to realize, and this is why I bolded, your genealogy research is an investment reflecting the time and effort you've spent tracing your roots. There's really no other way to put it. And like any other investment, your genealogy data should be safe and secure for future use. So think of it just as if you had a pile of stock certificates or some bonds or jewelry or mementos, anything like that. That's how you should be looking at your genealogy research data. So why would you want to back up your data? Okay, blank number of years of research down the drain. Now I want you to think about filling in that blank and seeing how comfortable you are with such a possibility. Where would you start? And are some of those online resources still available? That's what you need to think about. Another reason, your recall is not what it used to be. Now I have to admit to this. It's a fact of life. You can't remember all those favorite websites. Have you ever struggled to remember a website that you visited even the day before? I mean, I can't tell you how many websites I visit in a day. Also, which archive did you go to, maybe on that genealogy road trip? Was it in Tennessee? Was it Kentucky? Was it the public library? Was it the state archives? So you really are going to be dependent upon your recall if you have to reconstruct your data. Beware the digital disappearing act. And what I mean by that is more and more we're using digital items to capture material, such as a digital camera. Went to that family reunion last summer. Maybe you didn't print out those photos, or you didn't go to Walgreens or Walmart to have prints made, and they're sitting there on your computer. So you didn't print them out for safekeeping. So we use more and more digital devices, and we forget that we haven't made copies of that data. Stuff happens. Now, you may not use the word stuff when it happens to you, but stuff does happen. Natural disasters, fire, kitty cat spills a drink on your laptop, someone steals your netbook or your laptop. The odds are against you if you think you can avoid any of these situations. You know, it's part of life, and you've got to be prepared for it. And that brings us to making a data backup plan. The easiest way to approach backing up your genealogy is to come up with a plan and stick with it. And I know it sounds like a diet, and that's another fact of life. You really have to have a plan in order to do this. I use a lot of different plans in what I do, and look at it. We also, some of us plan out our genealogy research, right? We just don't walk into an archive and say, oh, where am I going to start? If you're going to make a road trip to an archive or repository, you usually have a plan. Think of your data, and you backing up your data is the same way to approach it. First thing you need to do is identify the data you need to back up. Now, what do we think of when we think of that? I'm going to skip back here, excuse me. When you identify the data, most of us think of programs like Legacy Family Tree or other genealogy software, right? And that's all we think about. No, you also have to think about, what about all those images that you scanned, all the documents that you may have scanned, if you have any research logs in Excel or Google Docs, scanned documents. What about your bookmarks, your internet favorites? All of those, if you have those somewhere, those are that's data. You have to do a really thorough inventory of where your genealogy data might be hiding. Okay? Next thing in your plan is identify a backup method that works for you. You should not commit to a method like copying to a flash drive once a week if that's not going to be enough for you. The method should be easy to use. It should have some form of automation. That is really what helps people do a backup. And also there should be some reminder built in to the backup method, and we'll talk about that in a minute, reminders. Once you do commit to doing a backup through a plan, you've identified your data, you should be backing up on a regular schedule. It really does not help if you say, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, and then tomorrow you say, I'll do it tomorrow. And you have to be on a regular schedule. We have some tips for that. A lot of genealogy people, at least in the blogging community, know that the first of every month is data backup day. We send out tons of reminders. And that's just it. You drop everything and you just back up your data. Also, what good is it to do a data backup if you're not willing to test that data? So let's say you've been backing up for 3 years, then you have a crisis like Geoff does where the computer melts down, and then you realize that your data backup has not been working fully or that the data can't be used. Not smart. So a good data backup plan also asks that you test occasionally restoring that data. Finally, keeping up with technology. Some people have used the term future proofing. And here's an example. Remember all those 5 1/4 inch floppy disks? Now, if this is where your backup data is, I can tell you right now, good luck finding a working 5 1/4 inch drive to read your data. If technology changes, you have to keep up with that technology. That's all there is to it. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck with something that is, that you can't use, that is outdated, and you won't be able to use the data that you've been backing up. So always keep apprised of what's out there. Hard drives, external hard drives are getting smaller. I remember a time before there were flash drives. Remember we had the different sizes in terms of disks and diskettes.
Hey Thomas, a
yes.
question from George. He asked, how do you test the backups without overwriting and causing problems? I'm going to get to that towards the end. But the thing is, what I do, I'll quickly. George has a good question. What I do is some programs, if it's an automated program, what I do is I will create sort of a test area on my hard drive where I will copy all my data there for safekeeping in case the restore doesn't work. You know what I'm saying? And then I run the restore, I look at the data, and then I can decide, well, the restore worked, I can get rid of what I call my hold area, and I'll show my hold area in a minute on my computer. Yeah, good, thanks.
Sure. Now we're going to talk about how do you identify